32 times over the past 30 years. The little town of ALTENBERG, Germany has hosted the EBERSPÄCHER Luge World Cup, most recently last year, with back-to-back weekends, not only a World Cup and a World Championships. Today, it is the site of stop number 5 on this year's FIL Luge World Cup as we get ready for the men's singles competition. Hi again, everyone. I'm Tim Singer. A closer look at this track, and to help call today's race and give us the inside between the two walls on the ice, I'm pleased to reintroduce from Team Ireland, Dr. D, Elsa Desmond. Elsa, welcome back to the microphone.
Thank you for having me back, Tim. So here in ALTENBERG, we'll be going from the men's start. So it's a much higher start height than we'll have seen this morning in the doubles and we'll see tomorrow in the ladies. It's quite a long track for the men and definitely technical. There's quite a few areas that we'll see in this POV that they just have to get right.
Right, the track is clear now for Felix Loch and Felder ITA.
So looking at this POV, a nice long start ramp. They'll be looking to build the speed through this top section, but it gets very technical really quite quickly here. Coming past the ladies start on their right-hand side, and they're going to go into this Omega section. A lot of people might make mistakes here. It's really crucial and quite technical as they come towards this rather flat section before the double start. And then again, coming towards 9, another area that we saw mistakes this morning in the doubles, and we might see some mistakes here from the men as well. Coming into this Kreisel, again, you'll see this red flag at the top. They need to have the height there, and that's where they want to start driving out to get this nice transition into 11-12. Get that 12 wrong, there is a good chance of athletes flipping there. Coming down towards this bottom section, this is where they're going to have this speed as they come into the uphill section at the finish. A lot of time can be lost in this bottom corner if they get that line wrong.
No flipping earlier today in the women's doubles competition won by Austria, but it was a race not without its major challenges, especially in the corner 9 Kreisel combination. As you can see here, the air temperature is getting a little colder, Elsa. The snow's letting up a little bit, but it appears as if the wind is picking up.
Absolutely, and it's going to be quite interesting because in training we had some very warm days in the positives, +4, +3, and so this really cold ice is quite different to what we saw in the training, so it'll be quite interesting to see how these athletes manage that.
Interesting stat that you just saw on your screen. The track record is 8 years old. The start record is 10 years old, and as we look at this 30 sled field in today's competition, that is the exception rather than the rule, Elsa, when it's seemingly start records and track records are broken every week.
Absolutely, with the huge advances that we're seeing within the sled technology, every single year athletes are getting faster. But with the snow today, I don't think it's going to be track record worthy runs today, just because it's going to be a little bit slower with the snow in the track.
Keep an eye out on the Austrians. Not only did they dominate the World Championships and World Cup here last season, they've been nothing short of just that, dominating all year long here on the World Cup. It's been unbelievable. That man there, David Glacier, his brother Nico, they, I believe, hold the top two. Notice Nico first and David 7th, but Austria is 1, 3, 4, and 7 in the World Cup points. There's a look at Nico.
Absolutely, and Austria already off to a fantastic start for the weekend with that win in the women's doubles this morning. They'll definitely be looking to carry that momentum into these next races.
I don't know if I remember a halfway point in any World Cup season when Germany was not leading the standings in any of the disciplines, but it's Austria leading the way in 3 and Latvia in men's doubles. So things could change pretty quickly, Elsa, over the next 3 weeks.
They really could. It's exciting to see what's going to happen now that we're on these German tracks.
ALTENBERG this week, Winterberg, Germany in the Hochsauerland next weekend, and then back to Oberhof before everyone heads to North America for the World Championship. Leading the way, 13th place last year at the World Championships on this track from Team Poland, Mateusz Sokovich.
I know Matthias had a few problems yesterday in his Nations Cup run. He wasn't particularly happy with the result, but it does give him this fantastic #1 start number, and he'll definitely be looking to use that.
4 paddles, we will see 5, and if someone is really feeling dangerous, we may even see a 6th paddle on that men's start ramp.
Matthias is generally a very fast starter. We saw that in Lake Placid last year at the start competition with him coming second. On this start, he'll have set the pace. Putting together a clean run here so far.
So far, and now we head to a very tricky part of this track, 9 into the Kreisel. Well done.
Beautiful exit there in curve 9, nicely in the middle, really pressing his head back to try to get that speed down the straight. Nice and high at the red flag. He's looking really clean down the track here at the moment. Problems there coming out of curve 13. Sorry, 14.
Skidding at the finish line, 55.132. The finish time for Collin. This men's start, Elsa, is about 400 meters above the double start, so that may make corner 9 a little less of a challenge, but 11 through 15, dangerous.
Absolutely. 9 has more pressure, so it's definitely easier from the higher corners, but you saw he had a really clean top section, and it was here on the exit of 14 that we saw him starting to have problems. And he looked a little bit disappointed at the finish there with that run.
Sweden's Svante Koala has been in the top 5 all season long in the Nations Cup, and more importantly, he has been a regular top 20 finisher on the World Cup.
Svante's really come on in the last few seasons. We've seen some great results from him over the last 2 years, so he'll definitely be looking to use this good start number in this race to get a solid result and guarantee him a spot in that second run.
26 years old, he will celebrate his next birthday next month at the World Championship in Whistler.
Not a bad place to celebrate your birthday in Whistler.
No, there's known to be a party or two thrown in Whistler Village.
A little bit of having to work there on the exit of 9, but he kept it nicely off the wall. And unlike other Kreisels, this Kreisel, a wave isn't a problem as long as the height is in the right place.
Flirting with the wall. Yeah, a little bit of a skid. Good recovery.
A little bit late there into 16, though. A few problems there, but managing to stay in the green.
Sweden sliding. It's a growing, regrowing program. Team Sweden with a lot of singles athletes. It'll be interesting to see if they can start fielding a doubles team as well.
And I expect Rasmus, their other singles man, will be back on the circuit next week in Winterberg. He's taken a few weeks off. Just some problems there coming out of 14, which will have cost him some time. And he gets the red light.
Flag. Yes, and the groan to accompany it. Number 3 out of 30. This is Alex Ferlazzo of Australia, and his performance here at the World Championships, I think it would be an understatement to say that was a career highlight.
Absolutely. A top 5 finish in the World Championships is no small achievement. Great to see him back on the podium yesterday with that 3rd place in the Nations Cup. He's had some inconsistencies this season with his racing, so hopefully he's going to find more consistency in the rest of the season.
Hard-working athlete, man without a federation. He has a federation, a one-man federation, but Alex always has to tag along with another nation, most recently Canada.
Really nice exit there of curve 9. He had a little bit of skidding in the top section, which will have cost him some time. We've seen he's already gone behind Svante, but back into the green now. He's having a nice bottom section here, really clean out of curve 14. That's the best line we've seen out of that corner so far.
Good run by Alex Ferlazzo, clearly a man comfortable on this track that's so challenging to so many others. A first place time by 32 hundredths over the other early starters.
Time in first place currently for Alexander.
We just saw him having some problems there after that finish corner. That's not uncommon on this track. Not a problem at all with these singles athletes or the races that we're going to be seeing today, but we've got the team relay coming up tomorrow, and that's when we're going to see the challenges from those messy exits of that last corner, when they have to hit that paddle.
Ferlazzo finished for run number 1. He'll make his way back up to the top of the track. And like Alex, this next man, Anton Dukash of Ukraine, had a bit of a breakout season last year. Anton had a number of top 10 finishes, a couple of 7th place finishes in Sigulda, finished 12th here in Altenberg in the World Championships.
I think there's some great healthy competition that goes on between Andre and Anton, and I think that really they're pushing each other, and it's so great to see him coming sort of into his form in the last 2 seasons.
And the fact, Elsa, that Ukraine made it onto the podium last week at the team relay in Sigulda, and it was not Anton, that probably stung a little bit.
Absolutely, but as I said, that healthy competition really helps these big teams, these bigger teams, to push each other when they've got more than one athlete in each discipline. A nice exit there of curve 9. A couple of little skids again. That's going to be that harder ice that we haven't had in training. We saw Alex have a really clean line down in this bottom section, so Anton's going to have to work really hard to beat that. He's probably going to stay in the red here. No major issues, but a couple of small errors.
1/10 of a second behind Alex Ferlazzo. It'll be interesting to see how long Alex can stay on top of the leaderboard. It was a very decent time. Dukash, a couple of little hits and skids.
Yeah, nothing too major, but all of this skidding, his steels cutting the ice there, all of that will have cost him some time. Particularly in the top section where we do have that flatter area just after the women's start. If you lose time in the top section, it can really compound down the bottom.
Josef Ninnis grabbing those handles at the top. Yesterday he won the Nations Cup qualifying race, and in Nations Cup he's the current World Cup or Nations Cup points leader. That's somewhat of a dubious distinction, but it has its own merits.
So fantastic to see that diversity within nations on the Nations Cup podium yesterday with Australia, Ukraine and Slovakia. Not something we've managed to see in all the disciplines. Sorry, yes, and Sweden in 4. Ninnis, a hugely experienced athlete. A couple of problems there just going into Omega. But looking really nice and relaxed, good form on this set. Again, a late entrance into curve 9, but he managed it well.
This is where the magic usually happens for Ninnis down here at the bottom. If the lines are clean, he tends to pick up time.
He had quite a big wave going up and down in the track during that Kreisel. It's not a problem for safety, but it will have cost him time. Big problems there out of curve 14.
And as promised, he had picked up time, but he gave it all away with the problems that Elsa just spoke about. So 3,800's back in 4th place. That will definitely be construed as a disappointment for Josef Ninnis.
Definitely not what he would have wanted there. This is just his curve 14. Just you can see on the exit, he had that rightward pressure and it pushes him into the wall. He did well to keep the early entrance into curve 15, but that will have cost him a lot of time.
Alex Ferlazzo leading in the early going among the qualifying group. 2 Americans qualified yesterday in the Nations Cup. 1 is in the seeded group. This is Tucker West, 29 years old. Tucker has been really struggling to find podium finishes in Europe. He's had many in North America, but he came close last year with a 4th place finish at the World Championships here in Altenberg.
Tucker is famously a very fast starter, but I think he's carrying an injury at the moment, so we're not seeing the normal speed we'd see from him in this top section.
Right, the last couple of weeks he's been nursing this injury.
He is in the green here now, though. And a nice exit there of curve 9 into that straight.
300th up at that last split time. One more clock stop before the finish.
A little rough there through 11-12, yeah, and hitting there on the entrance of 14. Nothing huge, but it's costing him time. And a late
thousandths of a second. Right, now into the red. So a lot of little mistakes adding up to the tune of about 1/4 of a second of time given away by Tucker West on the bottom half of the track.
You can see him shaking his head there. Just too many mistakes to stay in the green. And it's so difficult when you're someone like Tucker who's traditionally a very fast starter and you lose that speed that you're used to due to injury. It can be really tough to then make up the time further down.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because not only does that cost you time, Tucker's probably used to hitting different curves at a speed perhaps a little faster than he's hitting them right now.
Absolutely, and it can be really difficult psychologically as well when you know you normally give yourself this advantage in the top section and now you've lost that. It can almost feel like added pressure in the bottom section.
Now here's David Nuschler, 10th place in the World Cup standings with 2 top 10 finishes. He did have a DNF last year at the World Championships on this track in Altenberg. I don't remember whether that was a crash. It must have been.
Yeah, very different conditions though here today to last year. Putting together a clean run here so far. I know the Germans spent time here over the Christmas break, so he'll have had a lot of runs down this track in the last month. Really nice exit there of curve 9. Into the green, he's looking really clean here. Nice form on that sled.
Back
really
into the
smooth.
red. Let's see how he's trending here. 300s back.
It just shows how much speed Alex was able to get in that bottom section.
Keeping it close, a second place right now for David Nuschler, but as projected, Alex Ferlazzo has hung in first place for quite a bit of time now.
Yeah,
And
Alex is
perhaps
quite.
at least one more.
Alex seems to be quite confident on this track, and he seems to have also got the sled set up right here today, so I wonder how much more he'll climb. Really beautiful form there down that straight, pressing that head back.
The Germans have 4 here in the World Cup, as do many of the nations. Do you get 4 into the World Championships in Whistler, or is the limit 3 like the Olympics?
The Olympics is unique, and it's the only one which is 3, so there will be 4 in the World Championships as well.
Twice this year in men's singles, Austria has finished 1, 2, 3, 4 if you're keeping track. But here's Italy, Leon Felderer, 8th place finish last year, an impressive result for Leon at the World Championship.
Italy not having the strongest start to their season, not seeing the results that they've seen in some of the previous seasons. Putting together a nice run here so far. He is in the green. And a really clean exit there of curve 9. I don't think we'll see as many issues out of this curve 9 as we saw this morning and we'll see this afternoon, just because the men have that higher speed from the top section.
How about that middle start that you'll face tomorrow? How does curve 9 treat the women in singles?
There will be, I suspect, some more problems than we'll see in the men's from the women's start in that curve 9. Just we don't have the speed.
Felder in a battle for second or third, all the way back to 5th, 54.923 for Leon Felder of Italy. Yeah, you made the point a moment ago here, Elsa. Aside from one podium, I believe it was a 3rd place in the first team relay, Italy has been shut off of the podium in all of the singles and doubles races, which, given the Fischnallers and Vetters of the world, that is surprising.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. There's definitely been some mistakes within some of their sleds that normally are higher up into the medals, but I also wonder if their sled technology is not quite there this season.
Well, we'll get another indication right now with Dominic Fischnaller, the one-time World Cup overall champion, Olympic bronze medalist. Dominic, 31 years old, from Miransen. He had a disappointing 18th place finish last year at the World Championships here in Altenberg.
Yeah, Dominic, an athlete that's usually so hugely consistent. I remember he had problems last year in the World Championships here, so he'll definitely be looking to clean that up today.
The start looked smooth, but it looked like he took a little time to get his hands in position.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Your hands are often underneath your butt, so it can be quite difficult sometimes to get them in. But as long as you stay relaxed, it doesn't necessarily cost you time. Really nice exit there of curve 9, and he is 17 hundredths ahead at this point.
Looping a bit in the Kreisel, but the exit was fine.
That's that lucky loop. The height is in the right place, so it doesn't cost you too much. Really clean exit there of 14, and I think he will stay in the green here into this bottom section over Alex.
Absolutely beautiful lines by Dominic Fisher. You heard a little skid there right at the finish line. Not a big deal. Quarter of a second up on Australia. That's the Fischer type run we've come to expect.
Absolutely, that's more looking like himself, getting that bit more speed. Really clean lines here. And just looking so relaxed on that sled, which is what you want to see.
Sigh of relief from Dominic, but pretty subdued. Usually he says hello to his family, to Emily, to all sorts of people, to the camera. He knows he has work still ahead. This could be a podium weekend for Dominic Fischer. Plenty of racing still ahead here in run number 1. This is the second of the Germans, Timon Grancagnolo, who sits just ahead of his teammate Nussler in the World Cup rankings, 9th place at the moment.
Looked like he had a little problem on the start there. He was very to the right after his pull and first paddle. Corrected it well, but that will have cost him time.
It definitely has, as he's in the red. And a nice 4th place finish to open the season in Lillehammer.
He's having a few small problems here, not the cleanest run we've seen, and that's definitely reflected in that time. And again, very close to that right wall. Timon, we've seen get quite a few medals in the Nations Cup, but he just hasn't managed to get those medals in the World Cup consistently yet.
He came close with a 4th in Lillehammer, but he will likely look at a 3rd place finish at the moment here. 2nd, just ahead of Alex Ferlazzo by 0.03 of a second. Of the 4 Germans, this is the one Saxonian. Timon grew up not too far from Altenberg and Dresden.
That was what we saw on the start. Very to the right-hand side on that pull. Just looked a little unsettled and hitting early here. Just these little mistakes costing him time. And the blue light there for technical control.
Teams aus Lettland ist der nächste, Gins Bertins, Latvia. Please prepare your knees.
Gins Berzinch, the first of the Latvians. Only 2, I believe, or 3 from Latvia in today's race. Berzinch still just 20 to Gough.
Already in the red here behind Dominic, so he's got some work to do. Looking cleanly, though, through these first couple of corners in this Omega section. His head's a little bit up there. Nice exit there of 9. You can just see him trying to press his head back, but then lifting it up again to look where he's going. He's just not got the confidence on this track that we've seen from some of the other athletes that are able to keep their head back more. And again, just looking slightly unsettled on the sled through that section. No big mistakes, just not looking as comfortable as some of the other athletes we've seen.
Sled setup, though, looks good. The speed is there. 2nd place, 1/10 of a second back. A speed of 122 kilometers an hour, or 121.6. It translates to, we English-speaking country people, to 75.5 miles per hour.
Looking pretty clean through this section.
Felix Loch up next now, the next of the Germans. One podium this season, but top 5 in the World Cup standings. There have probably been very few weekends also over the last 18 years where Felix Loch has not been in the top 5 in the World Cup standings.
Just such an experienced athlete. He has so many runs, particularly down these German tracks. And over the last, I'd say, season or two, he really has been looking so fantastic on that sled. Looking nice and clean through this top section, but in the red behind Dominic. A lovely exit there, and look at that form. You couldn't even see his head for some of the straight. And into the green.
Felix doing what Felix does best, and beautiful lines on a track he knows probably better than anyone in today's race.
Absolutely, he just has that sled on autopilot. He's done many runs here and he knows what he's doing.
52 career World Cup victories for Felix Loch. Of note, that also includes 7 in the sprint discipline. But that trails Armin Zugler by 5 in the career rankings of World Cup wins.
I'm sure that is a title he'll be looking to take in the next year or two.
Right. He probably wants to make it pure and maybe win 10 more, take away those sprint titles and still catch Armin. That would be spectacular. He still needs to win another Olympic gold medal to equal his Italian rival. Now David Glacier. It's been an interesting history on this track for Glacier. He's had a lot of podiums in his World Cup career, only 1 victory, and that was right here in Altenberg 4 seasons ago. Now, Glacier crashed yesterday in the seated training, just to show you how Altenberg can give and how it can take away.
Absolutely. There's been quite a few crashes in training this week and last week, both Altenberg and Sigolda being very technical tracks here. Just some problems there coming into the Omega corner. But he is in the green. I wonder if those mistakes are going to catch him, though, with the time.
It was 13 thousandths at that last split, and he's opened it up to 300s.
He seems to have gotten away with it, just about. Needs to keep it clean in this bottom section. Problems there again coming into curve 13. And big problems out of 14. He's done well to stay on the sled. That could have been a lot worse.
What was potentially a first place run ends up in 9th. We know the Austrian sleds are fast. Once again in this race, that was proven when Glacier was clean. Unfortunately, Elsa, he was not clean top to bottom.
No, quite a few mistakes in that run in the top section, and that big mistake out of curve 14 there. This was this big problem coming out of curve 14, just too much rightward pressure, I think. And he goes into that right wall. He did well not to flip on the entrance of curve 15.
And insult to injury with the red light for David Glacier. Max Lanhan, as you know, has won just about everywhere around the world on the World Cup, but his success has known no equal to this Altenberg track. Last year, he captured the World Championship here. He followed that up with a victory in the World Cup race.
I believe last year he was one of the athletes that was quite low after the first run and had a very good second run and just stayed in the leader's box.
Famously, Elsa, I think that was the race where he put his foot down so he'd have a more favorable start time in the second run.
I think you're correct, yes. In the green here, again, another athlete that knows this track. He's got it dialed in, he's got it on autopilot.
These are even better lines than Felix, as Max Lanhan should take the lead. Beautifully done.
He will stay in the green into this bottom section. Looking very clean there.
Max won the opening race of the season, had one additional podium. That was in 3rd place. He sits in 2nd place in the World Cup standings behind Austria's Nico Glacier, who will be next to go.
A little clip of that ball at the start. And a beautiful exit there of curve 9.
I didn't catch that when that happened. I wonder what that cost him, if anything.
It will have definitely cost him some time. Any issue on the start is definitely not what we want to see, but he made it up further down the track and just shows what he can do in that 2nd run.
Germany, Italy, the top 3, all 3 of them overall World Cup leaders at one point in their life, champions. But here is the current World Cup leader, Nico Glacier. Nico has won 2 races. He's been on the podium 1 additional race. He also had the fastest time yesterday in seated training, for what it's worth. Often some of the top athletes will hold back on the final day of training.
The Austrians really are getting it right this season. We've seen some fantastic results from them so far, and he'll definitely be hoping to continue that today. Just hitting into curves with the Kreisel. Putting together
Took the lead early. This is the spot where David Glacier had the problems. Brother falls behind, but he should still be in the top 2 or 3 down here at the bottom. 2nd place, a 1/10 of a second back.
Just shows how much speed Max was able to get in that bottom section. No major issues in this run. Little rough transition there between 11 and 12.
60 points separate Lanhan and Glacier in the World Cup standings, with Glacier on top. So he figures if they hold their positions in run number 2 to hang on to that top spot, but it could become tighter. Still, of course, a lot to be decided here, with 2 more remaining in the seeded group. The next, Wolfie Kindl. Wolfie with a very disappointing Austria or ALTENBERG run last year. 21st place at the World Championships. This from a former world champion from 2017.
Not the fastest starter, but that's to be expected from Wolfie. He normally makes up his time in that bottom section, and by keeping that lines clean, although he is already in the green here.
His starts have improved over the later part of his career, but he's also had some injuries this year.
Absolutely, he's really put the work in, and it has shown in his results, just having to work a little to keep off that right wall.
Nice job here in the Kreisel for the 10-time World Cup winner.
He's looking really nice down this track here, putting together a fantastic run. He has dropped into the red, again, just showing how much speed Max was able to get in this bottom section. Oh, and a very late entrance there into 16. Ooh.
Wolfie misses out on a finish time, I believe. We hope he's okay. That was a spectacular crash.
Nasty.
Lisa Schulte is certainly concerned.
And he's standing, he's out the track. He looks okay. That was a really nasty crash. We saw him go very late into curve 16, hit the roof, come down, up again, and flipped. That's really not a fun crash to do with the speed that you get from men. But it looks like he's okay. He is standing.
That is fortunate that Wolfie is okay. Disappointed. You know, Elsa, I believe this is the first crash of the day.
That is really not a fun crash.
With the sled on top of him. So it's so great. Now check this out. You need to cross the finish line holding the sled. The clock stopped, but Wolfie will be disqualified, won't he?
Yeah, so you have to stay in contact with the sled. We saw this at the Olympics particularly, where I think about 4 or 5 athletes actually finished on their face, but with their sled on their back, so their times did count. Here, he wasn't in contact with the sled, so he will be disqualified. The most important thing, which I'm really glad to see, is he has walked away. He does look like he's okay. One thing which I will say, which you had a really nice shot of him at the finish, and it showed the new neck protectors that have come into Luge this season. So trying to prevent injuries, a bit like we saw Emily Sweeney have in the 2018 Olympics. These new neck protectors and neck supports have come in to try to make this sport safer. And actually, most of the athletes, again, you can see them wearing one here, are bringing in these new neck protectors.
And also, coincidentally, that crash that Wolfie just had falling from high off the wall was somewhat reminiscent of Emily's crash in Pyeongchang.
Yeah, any crash where you get that sort of a height has quite a high risk to it. But as we said, he's walked away okay. But it's great that these athletes are now wearing these new neck protectors. They're not yet mandatory, but I suspect they might be in the next few years.
Krister Zaporio's temporarily iced. We will tell you that he had as disappointing a world championship as one could have last year, with a 34th place finish for the Latvian, who ended up second in the overall World Cup standings. So he will look to atone here. He did end up back on the podium the following weekend, both the sprint and the 2-run race. Well, we've got a second. Emily, your comments on this. It's the first weekend, crash notwithstanding, it's the first weekend I can remember this season where the German sleds were faster than the Austrian sleds down at the bottom of the track. Even had he not crashed, Wolfie and the Glaciers lost time to Max and Felix down at the bottom.
Absolutely, and I do have to wonder whether it is actually the sled technology playing into that, or whether it is the driving, because it is a combination.
The familiarity
of both.
with the track.
Yeah, right, the athletes from Germany have so much time down this track that it might not be to do with the sleds at all. It might just be the familiarity and the skill of those athletes.
Sure. All right, let's see what Kristers can do. He started the season slowly, but came back with a second-place finish on his home track last week in Latvia.
He had a big skid in that top section. We heard it, and again, now this problem coming out of curve 9. So I suspect he will stay in the red for the rest of this run after those problems.
Right, and the question now is, can he keep it in the top 5?
And again, some problems out of that Kreisel. Just little mistakes, but all of this will have cost him time.
No, this is going to cost him 20. This is probably looking at a 7th place. 5th, not bad, 54.549. As his sister looks on down at the bottom, we will see Kindl in the race tomorrow. Latvia in 5th and 6th place right now.
Again, just these problems coming out of that curve 9, costing him some time. What's good, though, is the snow seems to have really lightened up, so they're not having to do those sweeps. They're not having to delay the start times for the athletes, and it doesn't seem to be having too much of an impact on the times.
Which is good news, and the 22nd green light now for Valentin Cretu. We've completed the seeded group. We're back into the qualifiers, and Elsa Valley had the dreaded qualifying spot for this race.
I know, it's so unfortunate to be the first person after the seeded group, but Valley is such an experienced athlete. He copes well regardless of where he is in that start order. Whenever I ask Valley if he's ready for a race, he always tells me he was born ready, so he's going to be looking to put down a clean run after his good results in the Nations Cup yesterday.
Right, very calm, very mild man, mild-mannered man who always has a smile down at the finish.
Absolutely, big loop here in the Kreisel. The key thing is getting the height at the right point, and he did, but that will have cost him some time. We don't expect to see any of the athletes in this later group coming into the green here. They're just going to be competing to get that second run. Late entrance there again to 16, a bit like what we saw from the Austrian earlier, but he managed it okay.
17th place time right now for Valentin Cretu, and as always, when we get through the seeded group, we closely watch the position number 20, because that is the mark that these athletes need to hit, 20 or better, to qualify for a second run.
Some skidding here in that top section, and again we saw this big problem in the lower section into curve 16. Whether he'll be able to stay in that top 20 with those mistakes, I am not sure. See, this is that late entrance. very high there in curve 16. Managed it well, but his feet were down. And you can just see he's a bit disappointed there.
Noah Collin now, the final of the Austrians. Jonas Mueller decided not to race this weekend at Altenberg. Jonas, number 3 in the World Cup standings, told me he was fine. He just was taking a week off. So he opens the door for Noah Collin to race for the first time in the World Cup. He's had a lot of Nations Cup experience as a non-qualifier.
Yeah, Jonas, I think, it just doesn't particularly like this track, and so has made the decision, as it's not part of Olympic qualification next year, just to not slide here this week. But a great opportunity here for the young Austrian to get that exposure on the World Cup. Nice exit there of curve 9. We heard some skids in that top section, which will have cost him time. But he's putting together a pretty decent run here so far. Little high on the end there of Kreisel, but manages it well. And a nice exit there.
Half a second back at this point, but that could be a top 15. And then he'll sit and watch to see if he gets a run number 2. 11. That's a good sign for Noah Collin.
That's a really good result for him.
Or a couple of weeks ago, Elsa, he won the Nations Cup race in Oberhof. That's got to sting a little bit when you win the Nations Cup race, but you're not a qualifier for the World Cup.
It is quite common for bigger nations, Austria, Germany, Latvia, to have additional starters in that Nations Cup, and they know going in that they're not going to be able to go into the World Cup. So for them, the Nations Cup experience is what they're here for.
But it makes you wonder, I won this Nations Cup race, how well would I do against the best?
Yeah, not a position I've ever been in, but I'm sure it can be quite challenging for these athletes.
Kaspars Rinks, the next of the Latvians. He's been hovering in about the upper teens for most of the season. 16th place, 17th place, 21st place. Although he did have a season's best 11th at home last week.
I'm sure the Latvians will be happy that Sigolda is included in that Olympic qualification tracks for next winter, Sigolda being one of the 5, so they will be hoping to get good results there again next season. But they're now focused on these European tracks for the next 3 weeks. A bit of a skid there in the top section. And a nice exit there of curve 9. Again, the men have this more speed through that section, so it's not such an issue as we'll have seen in the doubles. Staying really relaxed to that 11-12 section, so important.
Such a great mix of tight turns, big sweeping turns, straightaways, this Altenberg track. A thrill a second, 100th of a second, 1,000. 10th place right now for Kaspars Rinks. That sits him in pretty good shape for run number 2.
Altenberg, very much the sort of track that when you get it right is incredibly fun, but when you get it wrong, it can really bite you.
In fact, that just guaranteed him a place in the second heat. And I want you to elaborate a little bit, Elsa, on the qualification that you just alluded to for next year's Olympics. How will that work?
So qualification will be between the first race, which will take place in, I think it's Innsbruck.
And Innsbruck, then Lake Placid, Park City.
Yeah, so there's Innsbruck, Lake Placid, Park City, all before Christmas, and then Sigolda and Winterberg after Christmas. And then the ranking after those 5 races will determine who qualifies for the Olympics. So it's a maximum of 11 nations in the women's doubles, 14 nations in the men's doubles, 15 nations in each of the singles disciplines, and priority is given to any team with a team relay. So regardless of your ranking, if you have a team relay, you will qualify. And then it's the teams without a team relay going to be competing for the remaining spots.
It will be fun. There will be a lot of drama. I'm not exaggerating when I say there are a lot of tears, and there will be about 12 months from this weekend.
A couple of small mistakes in that top section, nothing too bad. He's half a second behind here in the red, which is what we'd expect to see from an athlete coming through the Nations Cup with this ranking. But again, he's another athlete just fighting for that top 20 to get that second rank. Looking really nice there, really pressing the head back. Looking clean through this bottom section.
Gough, one of 4 Italians in the race, 16th place right now. That should get him a second run. We still have a couple of good athletes coming up. Ukraine and the USA up next. They have been in the top 10 in their careers. Japan will fight for a podium spot.
Just going back to what we were saying earlier about those additional starters, a team does have to specify whether an athlete is an additional starter or eligible to qualify for the Nations Cup prior to the race. So they can't see who does the best and then select the ones that will go through. They do have to say in advance. So sometimes there will be 2 athletes in the Nations Cup, and the better one from the nation is actually the additional starter. But by the time the race has happened, it's too late to change.
Sure. Andre Manzi, the next of the Ukrainians, 36 years old. Andre with her first ever last weekend, a podium position on the World Cup simply by not crashing along with his teammates.
So great to see the Ukrainians in the medals there, so I'm sure he will be on a high coming off of that. Bit of a skid through there in the top section. Again, another athlete, a bit like Valentin Cretu, who's got a huge amount of experience from one of the mid-sized nations, always happy to help out the younger athletes in the small nations. So great to see him still here and still going strong. Putting together a pretty nice run here after that skid in the top section. And a nice early entrance there.
Great lines from Manzi, who finished 15th in the World Championships last year. Bit of a skid down there at the bottom, but 18th place, not safely into run number 2. But he could get there and probably will.
I wonder if he tapped his feet down a couple of times. I think I heard some feet on the ice, but it might have just been some background noise.
Well, if the temperature raises by about 15 degrees and it starts raining, then he'll be in a great position in run number 2. That's probably why he put his feet down.
Absolutely. That's what we do nowadays. You put your feet down to get a better start number.
Exactly, and that actually, we joke, but that is in part why they changed the start order protocol this year. Now we have Johnny Gustafsson. Johnny began the season with a podium finish in the Nations Cup, but then enjoyed being part of the seed the last several weeks. Now re-relegated, not only to qualifying, but he had a pretty low finish yesterday in the Nations Cup.
Yeah, there is a group of athletes that we'll see in the men's and the women's that sort of go between seeded group and Nations Cup, just up and down. Little problem there in that top section. That will have cost him some time. Again, another athlete who will be looking to fight for this second run.
Johnny had a top 9 last year at the World Championships, 9th place in Altenberg. He also had a 5th place finish earlier this year on the World Cup.
Looking clean through this section here, slightly later entrance than you'd like into 14, and it bites him there on the exit.
He avoided the pinball machine ricochet, but he did have a pretty hard tap there, as you saw. 20th place right now for Johnny Gustafsson. His teammate Tucker West is in 13th, and Tucker could very well be the only American to qualify for run number 2.
Not the result he was hoping for here today. This is that curve 14. He went a little bit later than you'd want, and again gets this sideways pressure onto the right on this exit. And because this is an uphill section, it sort of goes up and down. You have a lot less grip on the ice because your runners don't touch very much of the ice. So trying to do corrections. And just a shout out to his mum, happy birthday there.
Happy birthday to Mrs. Gustafsson, watching this morning from Messina, New York. Now Lucas Pecci of Italy, 20 years old, from Bruneck. Gustafsson, who just made it down, sits on the bubble right now in 20th place. So any subsequent athlete is looking for a 20 or better to make it into run number 2. And Johnny is hoping that doesn't happen with anyone.
Lucas, I believe, coming off a crash last week in Sigolda, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So he'll just be looking to put down a solid run here.
top 20 and 18th place finish.
Late
for
entrance
Austria.
there into 9, but he managed it reasonably well. A little bit of problem on the exit.
Now the Kreisel. Every track in Germany has a 270 or 360 degree Kreisel corner.
Looking pretty good in this bottom section, but definitely some mistakes in the top, which will have cost him some time. I don't think it will be enough for a top 20.
And you're correct, 55.553, the single run time today for EBERSPÄCHER of Italy. Unusually Italian-sounding name for an Italian luger.
This was just that late entrance into curve 9, really high in the top section, and just a bit of sideways pressure here on the end, tapping that right wall. Will have cost him some time. Great to see the spectators out here, even in the snow, even in the cold. We love that support.
No question about it. It was incredible last week in Sigulda. So many fans. Now it's been fun to watch the slow and steady progress of Seak Kobayashi, 23 years old from Japan. He had a 16th place result in Innsbruck. Relatively speaking, that was a spectacular finish.
He's really had some strong results this season. We didn't see him racing very much last winter. I think he stepped away from the World Cup, doing a lot of training last winter, and we've seen that training coming in this season with these great results. His original track, the first track he slid, was in Nagano in Japan, a track that's now closed, and he's now in a partnership with the Americans, which seems to be working very well for him.
Nagano, his home track. Unfortunately, they closed that track, as also mentioned, in Izuna Kogen. But the other two Asian tracks remain open and will be the site.
Late entrance there into 16. He did really well to stay on that sled there. That was incredibly high in the second half of 16. He does look a bit knocked there, but okay, and will not make a second run.
He will not make a second run? It looked like he was on the sled when they crossed the finish.
He will get a finish time. He was on the sled.
Oh, I see. He did
well.
qualify, of course, time-wise.
Yeah, he did incredibly well to stay on the sled there. That was a very late entrance into 16. See, here's that late entrance, really high, drops down and then comes high again. As we've already seen once today, did incredibly well to stay on this sled. But I hope his arm is okay, because that can really hurt.
Out of the track, walking to the finish, seemingly all right, if not a little bruised and battered. Here's Mirza Nikolaev.
This is Martinovski.
Martinovski first, yeah.
From
Nikolaev
Ukraine.
on deck. I believe a World Cup debut this season.
Great to see Ukraine fielding such a big team this season.
They brought a lot of athletes here to Altenberg. Now, several of them had issues during training and didn't stay around to qualify in the Nations Cup, but maybe like the third largest team.
So there is no junior racing this week because the juniors post-Christmas season hasn't started yet. So we've seen quite a few of the juniors. Anna Schritt, for example, on the women's side from the junior ranks has come up to this race. So Ukraine bringing those juniors up to get this experience on the World Cup, which is so fantastic for these younger athletes. Putting together a pretty solid run here, a couple of small mistakes. And that rightward pressure out of curve 14, he had that late entrance. And again, problems out of 15, 16 will have cost him a lot of time.
Johnny Gustafsson remains on the bubble in 20th place, as we've still got 4 more to come here.
You can just see the disappointment there. Not the run he was hoping for. Big problems in the bottom section. Pretty nice start there.
Yeah, confident start.
This is where things started to go wrong. He went slightly late into 14, gets this rightward pressure on the end of 14, skidding through curve 15. Really high on the end of 15 and late into 16 with some big skidding. But he's smiling and he will race again.
Now, as promised, Mirza Nikolov of Bosnia. And moments ago, we talked about the Nagano track closing. Mirza's hometown is Sarajevo, where, of course, they had an Olympic track. Big problems early.
Mirza's on a new sled the last couple of seasons, and he's really improved in his results compared to his old sled, but he is having some big problems in the top section here. He had a really nice training this week. He's put together some really solid runs, but just having the problems today in this race. Nice exit there of curve 9, but unfortunately when you have a problem in the top section, the time is already gone.
Right, and you tend to have, or you should have, some better lines because you're not quite carrying the speed you normally would at this point.
Yeah, I don't think that mistake will have cost him enough to lose speed. Oh, again, hitting there before curve 15, late entrance to 16. Not the run Mirza would have been hoping for here.
26th place for Mirza. That track in Sarajevo, incidentally, was the site of a war zone during the early 1990s, tragically, but they are making moves to rebuild it, not necessarily for Winter World Cup action.
Interesting. I know that Mirza still slides on that track on wheels in summer,
Exactly.
so it does still get used, but just not iced. Mirza is the only representative from Bosnia this week, as his teammate Hamza is at home with an injury. Just some
shaking his head.
Yes,
Great look at the spikes on the hands of Eddie Krejcian, the second of two from Romania in today's race. 24 years old from Zanaya, Romania. He's been on the national team for the past 9 seasons, since he was 16. Smooth, if not particularly powerful paddles there at the start ramp. Did you see that piece by George Hackl on YouTube about that old start ramp for the men here?
That start ramp looks terrifying. But I must say, I am loving the Romanian suits this year that the men have. They're very 80s. I think they look fantastic. As Eddie's putting together a pretty decent run here, a couple of small mistakes. He will just be looking to keep it clean to the finish.
Good line in the Kreisel.
Ooh, problems there out of the Kreisel, hitting that right wall. Did well to stay on that right-hand side for the early entrance, but a lot of time will be lost. Again, popping his feet down there into that curve 13. And a slightly later entrance than you'd like into curve 16. All of this will have cost him time.
1.522 back, 24th place for Krejcian. His teammate Valentin Cretu is also out of run number 2 in 22nd place, but it will probably be the veteran Cretu tomorrow joining his teammates for Romania's team relay.
And we will see 2 Romanians men's doubles this afternoon. This is just the mistake he had coming out of Kreisel, hitting that right wall. As I said, he did very well to stay on that right-hand side and keep the early entrance. When you get that late entrance into that curve 11, it can be really scary.
Marian Skupek of Slovakia on course now. 2 remain. He's the first of 2 to go. 20 this year, and 19th place finish for Marian in Oberhof. We'll be back in Oberhof in 2 weeks, the only site this year to host 2 races on the World Cup.
Marian's a very, very tall athlete, so he'll be looking to use those long arms to get him off the start and build some speed there. Looking nice through this top section, although he is in the red.
The 22-year-old Olympian cites his favorite track in the world as Whistler, so that works in his favor at this year's World Championships.
He's looking really clean through this run so far. He's putting down some nice lines. Working a little bit hard there.
Staying low, though, in that tight combination.
Big problems there coming out of curve 14, late into 16. And that, unfortunately, is the time lost for him. He was having a really nice run up until that curve 14, and then just the problems caught up with him in that bottom section. but enjoying the
27th
crowds there
place.
down at the finish.
Right. It gets frustrating when you're back in 26th, 27th most weeks when you know you should be hopefully making improvement, and you think you are.
But still a relatively young athlete, only 22 years old, and this really is a sport that where it comes with time. As he gets more experience and matures as an athlete, the consistency, I think, will come, and we'll start to see those solid results from him.
Well, the USA is guaranteed 2 into run number 2 because right now in 20th place is Johnny Gustafsson. Only 1 remains to try to knock him out, and that's his teammate Hunter Harris. Hunter has had part-time World Cup action over the past few years, but of note, Elsa, his best World Cup finish was in 18th place here in Altenberg last season.
Great to see Hunter back in the World Cup. He was an additional starter in the pre-Christmas season, but then has moved back into the main team for these races post-Christmas, which is fantastic to see for him.
In fact, he knocked off his teammate Aiden Mueller by just a couple of hundredths of a second in yesterday's Nations Cup qualifying.
Working a little bit down that straight, that will have cost him some time, but looking relatively clean here.
Needs to be within 9/10 of a second at the bottom.
Big problems there going into curve 13. Hit that wall, he's done well to stay on the sled, but really it is a survival game now. Big problems down this bottom section.
To the finish, it will be 1 run and only 1 run for Hunter Harris. 28th place, a lot of marginal mistakes. Not small, not huge, but that cost him over a second time.
Yeah, he had some really big problems in this bottom section, and I wonder if with these athletes that have come through the Nations Cup, some of these mistakes we're seeing are due to the massive change in ice conditions between training and what we're seeing in the race today. It is much colder, the ice is much harder. This big problem here through 13, 14, putting his feet down, really just doing his best to survive on that sled.
It was also a surprisingly slow start time for Hunter as well, 28th fastest.
He really did well to avoid crashing there.
Great instincts by all of the luge athletes. They're used to that fast time and danger lurking. Well, Max Lanhan is the 2-time defending World Cup champion. He currently sits in 2nd in the World Cup standings this year, but sits in 1st, a 1/10 of a second up on the World Cup leader, Nico Glacier. Loch in 3rd, Dominic Fisher looking to break onto the podium for the first time this season. And Johnny Gustafsson made his way down the track in 20th place and stayed there as all of the remaining sleds could not better his time. He'll be the first to go in run number 2. Unfortunately for Wolfie Kindl, a 2-time podium winner this year, he had an awful crash down below, did not finish, disqualified, but is okay. So Elsa, what do you see happening in run number 2? Will they work some Austrian speed magic on those sleds and Nico can overtake Max, or will it be Max's race to lose?
I suspect here on a German track, it will be Max's race to lose. He has so much experience here, and I'm just not sure the Austrians will be able to catch him.
We've got about a 22-minute break. We'll catch you at 40 minutes past the hour. Elsa and I will be right back here for run number 2 of the men's singles competition as the ongoing EBERSPÄCHER FIL Luge World Cup continues from Altenberg.
EBERSPÄCHER stands for reliable automotive systems and components. Our aim is to offer the best quality in every application. And therefore, each of our products reflects our passion. EBERSPÄCHER, driving the